Hello everybody and welcome back to more of the Labyrinth of Grisaia. In the last episode, well, we're moved into JB's apartment. Well, it's not really her apartment, she's loaning it from Uncle Sam, so... But she's got pretty swanky digs, doesn't she? Of course she does. Alrighty. Sooner or later, I'd probably grow accustomed to my new life here. Right. Accustomed. In other words, I still had to adapt myself to the world around me, and honestly, it felt a little bit stifling. That wasn't just true for me. I think it applied for JB as well. It was the fact that Asuko was dead. We had to accept that and accustom ourselves to it. But that proved much more difficult than either of us had expected. Even when we talked about work, Asuko's name would inevitably pop up when the discussion turned to specific tactics or general strategy. During meals, just seeing a favorite of Asuko's on the table would remind us of her. Eventually, we began to fall silent every time she came up in conversation. Kusakabe Asuko had been an even larger part of us than we'd known. Aw, look at that. Aw. Words almost spoken, trapped by our closed mouths, curdled to the frustration in our chests. The memory of Asuko became a thorn in our hearts. By the time things got this far, the two of us no longer knew how to interact with each other. We tried to fill the holes in our hearts by holding each other, hurting each other. No. I was hurting JB, that's all. Out of selfish sadness. I'd lost one woman and now I was taking my pain out on another. Even so, JB accepted my actions without saying a thing. Maybe she knew it was the only form of comfort she could offer me. Her kindness was almost unbearable. Couldn't stand it. Sometimes when I thought about how dependent I was on her compassion, the guilt and shame would bring me to the verge of tears. Whenever JB saw me holding back the urge to cry, tears filled her eyes as well, and she hugged me so tightly. We had to find a better way forward than this. We needed to live more boldly, more crudely, the way Asuko had.
私と一緒にいるとどうしても思い出してしまうなら一緒にいない方がいいのかな
I agree. When JB got home late from work, she'd take a bath, have a few drinks, and say the same thing she always did. You don't have to worry about me. As she slumped back on the couch, I stood behind her, using a dryer on her hair and giving her my usual replies.
辛いのは私の方かもね。ごめん、ユージ。忘れて。
Tears rolling down her face, JB fell asleep right there on the couch. My heart aching, I picked her up without a word and carried her to her bed. One day, after things had continued like this for some time, JB left for work and didn't come back. Periodically, she'd check in over the phone. JB claimed she was busy with work, but in reality, she was probably just avoiding me, or the suffocating sadness that had come between us. Without her around, the apartment was nothing more than a well-furnished birdcage. I might as well have stayed shut up in Asuko's cabin for all good it did. What was I supposed to do now? They say life's a journey. When you lose sight of your destination, it's usually best to turn back and retrace your steps. But Kusakabe Asuko had always been my home. Now that she was gone, where was I supposed to return to? A journey, huh? Come to think of it, I hadn't done much in the way of traveling. I don't know when this was exactly or how the topic came up, but I did talk to Asuko about traveling once.
Huh? Hokkaido? 行ったことあるぞ。
For a job?
いいや、プライベートで。
To fight a bear?
なんでだよ。普通に観光だよ。
Did you take a bus tour or something?
いや、観光バスは嫌いだ。ほら、裏の納屋の中に幽霊のポンコツがあるだろ。あれで行ったんだ。
Oh, the motorcycle. What's wrong with bus tours, though?
だっておめえよ、観光バスなんてあれだぞ。はーい、時間です。あれを見てください。これを見てください。って天井の時間まで決められてんだぞ。
Well, I could see your point.
旅行が終わって家に帰れば、疲れ以外の何も残っちゃいないような旅の何が面白い。
Fair enough. I've never been on a trip, so I can't really say.
いいか、ユージ。旅の意味ってのはな、何を見つけて何を持ち帰るかが重要だ。人と同じものを見て人と同じ発見をすることはわざわざ旅に出なくてもできる。一人でバイクで気ままに旅して、気になるものがあったら止まってみればいい。知らない道があったら入ってみればいい。道を間違えても気にしない。自分で見て感じて発見して理解する。そういうことを繰り返してるとな、人と同じものを見ても違う見え方をしてくるもんだ。
Very profound.
軍人なんて仕事をしてるとよ、そういった人とは違う視点ってのが重要だったりもするわけだ。わかるか？
Yeah, well, more or less.
なんとなくかよ。まあそうだよな。よし、そんじゃお前が免許取ったらバイクで北海道行くか。一月も向こうにいりゃなんか違ったもんが見えてくるだろう。
What about work?
サラリーマンじゃねえんだ。休めばいいさ。
I think an office drum would have less trouble taking a vacation, actually.
細けい子だ、どうだっていいんだよ。バイク2台で北海道まで行ってよ。そっから先は現地解散で別行動な。
Why even bother going together then if we're just gonna separate?
バカだな。私の後についてあれ見ろこれ見ろ言われたらバスと変わんねえだろうが。合流場所だけ決めて別行動すんなよ。そんでな、キャンプ場で合流したら何を見てどう感じたか酒でも飲みながらお互いに語り合うってわけよ。
Sounds like fun.
その方が旅として濃いし絶対面白いから。
Interesting. I guess we'll need 2 cameras then.
最初のうちはよ、一人の心細さで走るだけで精一杯になっちまう。景色見てる余裕すらねえ。けど慣れてくりゃいろんなもんが見えてくる。気がつきゃメットの中で大声で歌を歌いながら走ってる。一人を楽しどうしても一人じゃ寂しいってんならジョンを連れて行きゃいい。
Oh, poor John. I miss that little guy. Just a little girl.
こうよ、タンクの上にベタっと伏せさせてな。犬がいるってだけでこんなに心強いのかって改めて感動するぞ。観光バスの旅行に比べりゃ無駄だらけだ。けどなユージ、人生ってやつは無駄を楽しむもんだ。無駄を重ねてきたやつの方が生きるのがうまい。楽しい人生ってやつだ。ま、ガキにはまだわかんねえか。
Someday, let's go to Hokkaido. That proposal of Asuko's never actually became a reality. That didn't mean it was too late for me. I had no one to do with myself after losing her, but now I was starting to get an idea of how to move forward. Long story short, I'm going to leave and have myself a bit of a journey.
どこへ行くの？
That's a good question. I guess I'll Just go with the breeze for now.
目標を失ったら風の吹く方へってこと？
Sure, I'm still Marina Hart, I guess.
帰ってくるの？
I don't know. Of course I am. Absolutely. I mean, this is me we're talking about. I'll probably come asking you for help if I run into any trouble. You know me. Do you know me? I don't even know me.
不安。あなた、お金とかちゃんと持ってるの？
Yeah, I've got a bit saved away. And if I run out, I'll just look for work locally.
まあいいわ。行ってらっしゃいな。携帯だけはなくさないようにね。
That's a surprise. I was sure you'd try to stop me.
引き止めて欲しかったの？
No, I guess not. I mean, you're gonna be lonely without me around, right? Especially at night.
さっさと行っちゃいなさいよ。バカね。
At first, I figured I'd head up to Hokkaido and go looking at the same things Osho had seen. But deciding on a destination beforehand felt a little wrong somehow. It was like cheating. For the time being, I returned to Osco's cabin and retrieved her motorcycle from the shed out back. Taking the battery off its trickle charger, I reinstalled it on the oversized oil-cooled 1100cc bike, then pressed the self-starter switch. I'd have expected some trouble with the engine, but it started up just fine on the first try. And again, I'd taken the bike for a ride about 4 months previously, and when I was done, I'd removed the battery and added a fuel stabilizer to the tank and carburetor, so there wasn't any real reason to be surprised. As long as the engine started up, there wasn't much else to worry about. Once I tied my backpack to the tandem seat, my packing was basically complete. Next, I put on my riding gear, a pair of deerskin gloves, a leather double rider's jacket from the UK, and engineer boots with visible wear on the left instep, where the shift pedal rested. All I had to do was strap on Osco's old silver jet helmet, and I could leave any time I pleased. Soon enough, I was on my way. Doing the things Osco had done, seeing the things she'd seen, wasn't going to help me regain any of the things I lost. But it was the only way I could think to fill the hole her death had left in my heart. I hadn't decided on a destination, but just riding around randomly wouldn't be any different from taking a walk. I kept unconsciously following roads I was already familiar with. Deliberately choosing routes I'd never taken before, I circled up down Honshu for a good 2 weeks. Ultimately, I found myself heading for Hokkaido the same way Osco had. I tried to take the ferry in Orai? Or you. I don't know. It's one of us. But there wasn't any tickets available. So I rode over to Sendai instead. They didn't have any spots for two-wheeled vehicles on the ferry, so if you wanted to be on the safe side, it was best to reserve a spot in advance. As soon as I heard that, I ordered a ticket using the web browser on my cell phone. Isn't technology just nifty? From Sendai, I'd be riding over to Tomakomai. The ferry left at 8 p.m., but I got there at 3:30 in the afternoon, so I ended up napping on the second floor of the terminal. In time, the boat pulled into the harbor, let off the passengers from Nagoya. Finally allowed us to board. I'm sorry, I'm horrible with names. Taking a few boat rides inside of combat vehicles, but this was my first time taking a motorcycle onto a ferry. Honestly, the process made me a little nervous. Given the size of my bike, I had to be very careful. If I opened the throttle, the rear wheel might skid onto the middle deck. One panic squeeze with the front brake might send me toppling over. Following the staff's instructions, I made my way toward the bottom of the boat, put on my handle lock, and tied the motorcycle down, leaving it in low gear. It seemed to be firmly fixed in place. I explained I wouldn't be able to touch the bike again until we reached Hokkaido, so I took out my backpack off the rear and headed up to the passenger cabin. Eventually, a gong rang out to signal our departure, and Ferry sets sail with a bit of assistance from a tugboat. Outside the cabin window, the lights of Sendai Harbor and the city beyond rolled slowly by. I left mainland Japan behind with a silent farewell, swearing that I'd return one day with my strength renewed, or something like that. The ferry reached Tomokomai a bit past 10 in the morning. The passengers promptly began to disembark. After untying my motorcycle, I waited for the four-wheeled vehicles to finish, then firmly made my way off the boat and onto northern soil. My first impression of Hokkaido was simple. It was a seriously spacious place. The roads were all very wide, and once you got a bit outside of town, you tended to find a whole lot of nothing, kinda like here. Glancing down at my trip meter, I realized it had been 168 kilometers since the last time I refueled the tank. I rode around looking for a gasoline station, but to my surprise, there were none to be found. On the verge of panic, I stopped my bike and took out a road map. Using my cell phone to pinpoint my location, I scoured the map and found that the nearest gas station seemed to be over in Iwamizawa. After finally getting my hands on some gasoline, I was wondering what to do next when a small group of bikers rode by, their motorcycles burdened with luggage. I'd followed them on a whim. They led me past a city famous for its mountains and ultimately to a place called Niso Pass. I stopped to eat at a drive-in there and asked the biker in his 50s, what looked like a veteran, where I could find the local campground. He pointed it out on my map. I suppose I'd gotten used to city living, but Hokkaido really did seem huge at first. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen the horizon like this. Almost felt like I was in a foreign country. The road stretched out endlessly in front of me. I was ready to gas because I couldn't manage more than 20 kilometers per liter, so the numbers on my trip meter were a source of some real anxiety. I made a habit of fueling up every chance I got. Who knew if there'd be another gas station after this one? Had Asuko felt the same way, looking out on the scenery? I guess at that point you probably wouldn't even care. My 9th day in Hokkaido. At the campground at night, I noticed a man heating his food inside an empty can, which he held over a small gas stove. He told me it was a good way to cook simple meals for one, since you could just throw away the can later. No need to bother finding water to wash your mess kit. Seemed pretty logical, right? I was a bit impressed. When I tried it out for myself, it worked well enough, but the food tasted noticeably worse than usual. I decided to file this trick away under might come in handy someday. Day 12. Leaning into the fairing as I barreled down a long straightaway, all I could hear was the sound of my engine, exhaust system, and drive chain. Somehow I felt like the world had left me behind. Irrational anxiety rose up inside me. I'd never been that social a person, but right now I wanted to see another human being so badly I felt like screaming. For lack of a better alternative, I gave it a try. Asuko! Sorry, I'm late tonight. I'm not yelling. Come all the way up north and here I was shouting the name of a dead woman. Pretty pathetic, really. I didn't have any intention of forgetting her, but maybe it was about time to work on moving forward. Day 15. I found myself behind an American motorcycle moving sluggishly down a long straight stretch of road. For a moment I thought about trying to pass them, but it seemed like more trouble than it would be worth. I slowed to a leisurely pace and spent some time studying the scenery. Eventually we passed a policeman who'd been lying in wait at an intersection. Now it all made sense. Things might get messy if a cop hauled me in, and JB would probably end up giving me a scolding. Wasn't like I had any place to be, might as well take it slow and easy, right? Day 21, 3 weeks. 200 meters ahead of me on a long straightaway, I spotted something black lying in the middle of the road. I approached slowly and found it was the carcass of a deer. A wave of nausea hit me hard. Apparently I still hadn't gotten over my issues with dead bodies of any kind. I looked around for a car with a big dent in its hood or a motorcycle with its fork lodged in the exhaust pipe, but there was nothing. No biker lying with his head twisted at an unnatural angle either. That was a bit of a relief, actually. Day 25. The weather took a turn for the worse, and my body temperature quickly plunged. I was shivering in my leather jacket. First, I tried to tough it out until the next rest stop. When after a terrifying moment of lightheadedness, I pulled over and opened my backpack with trembling hands, then put my long raincoat on over my jacket and jeans. It made a surprisingly big difference. The only problem now was my hands. I could rest my left on the head of the engine, but my right grew colder and colder with every minute on the handle. Experimentally, I put work gloves on top of my riding ones. It helped a little, but I clearly needed a better solution. Day 28. With my bike running in 5th gear at 2500 RPMs, I casually opened the throttle. For some reason, my rear wheel spun sideways. I stopped to see if I'd run over a patch of leaves or a cow patty, but it turned out that the wheel had just gone completely bald. When I checked the front tire as well, I realized it was badly worn on the right side, but not the left. No wonder she'd been shaking every time I let go of the handle. I hurried over to the nearest motorcycle shop, but they said they'd have to send far away for new tires. Their inventory was apparently better in bigger towns, so I asked the clerk to call around to their other stores. Once we found a place with the right goods, I rode over carefully and had the tires replaced. On top of that, they swapped out the front wheel bearing, distance collar, and axle shaft, all of which had warped from wear. Total cost came to 67,000 yen. I knew these parts wore out eventually, but the bill was pretty painful. Yeah, I'd have to try to cut down on my food expenses from now on. Day 31. Stopping at a random drive-in, I gave their deep-fried salmon meal a try. That sounds absolutely disgusting. Proved to be unbelievably salty, practically inedible without rice. And they made up for the poor quality with truly massive portions. Looking down at my overly full plate, I found myself thinking of JB. Despite her size, the woman wasn't a big eater. When we went to restaurants together, she often couldn't finish what she was served. That said, she did have a good 5 meals per day. Whenever she ran out of steam, JB would smile at me and silently push the rest onto my plate. "You're young, so eat up," seemed to be the message. Back when Asuka was alive, she'd apparently played a similar role. JB might be a large, noisy, shaggy-headed woman, but you have to admit, she did have a bit of a cute side. I wonder what JB's doing right now. For the first time since I'd left, I found myself missing her. My mind had been full of Asuka for a very long time. Maybe it was finally beginning to make a little space for other things. That same night, I sent JB an email from my phone. "I love you, Julia." I received a response to this brief message in less than a minute. Well, are you drunk? No. My first reaction is something along the lines of that damn shaggy head, but at the same time, I couldn't help but smile how typical JB it was. I'd seen and experienced a lot since arriving in Hokkaido, and I was starting to regain something that resembled self-confidence. But at this point, I also began to notice something strange. Even when I gunned the throttle, the needle on my RPM gauge was responding very sluggishly. Asuko hadn't exactly treated this engine kindly in her day, and it had a good 70,000 kilometers under its belt. It tended to burn through gasoline quickly. I've been riding it carefully and changing the oil on a regular basis, but one day I noticed a strange clattering noise coming from the head, and when I pulled over into a convenience store parking lot, the engine promptly gave up the ghost. No matter how many times I pressed the switch, the starter really just click-clacked, and the bike didn't even twitch. I tried push-starting it, the second gear, but the instant I released the clutch, the rear wheel just locked up. For lack of any better options, I spent 6 hours pushing the heavy hunk of junk down the road to the nearest repair shop. From what the mechanic could tell, either the general wheel bearing and the crankshaft or the big end bolt of the conrod had probably broken. None of those words I understand. And repairing it would be a major operation requiring them to remove the engine from the body of the motorcycle. My financial situation wouldn't allow that. So I called up a vehicle transportation company instead, ended up having to push another 27 kilometers to the nearest depot. Having lost my wheels, I turned back and began to retrace my path on foot. weighed down by my backpack. Honestly, what the hell was I doing? Might have been funny if it wasn't so damn ridiculous. As I trudged down the road with my leather jacket and oversized backpack, a group of bikers roared past. A few of them were going ridiculously fast. Where were they off to in such a hurry? They had some place they wanted to be that badly. I envied them. One of the motorcycles in the group actually took the time to turn around and come back after passing me. It was a Kawataki D1 with a strange orange and purple paint job. How very unusual. The person riding seemed to be a relatively young man. Lifting the visor of his helmet, he asked me if I'd been in an accident. When I honestly replied that my bike had simply met its end, the guy gave me a knowing grin and said, "Bet you rode to death and never changed the oil, right?" Making excuses seems like a waste of effort, so I gave him a wry smile. The man offered me a ride toward my destination, but of course I didn't have any such things. That was the only reason I'd ended up here in the first place. I'm just a moron who spent the last month riding around in circles. The man's reply to this was, "Ah, youth." A loud burst of laughter. I didn't guess I'll leave you to it then. He raised a hand in farewell and rode off the way he'd come.